Have you ever looked into a dog's eyes and wondered what it has been through? Do you believe that an abandoned dog, one that has lost all trust in humans, can find love and happiness again? This is not just a story about a dog. This is a journey of survival, courage, and the incredible power of love. Join us as we uncover the heartwarming story of Max, from a hopeless dog behind bars to an unbelievable journey of finding the light in life once more. But will the road be easy? And will Max's dark past ever truly let him go? Before diving into this emotional story, we would love for you to subscribe to Dog Stories. Every subscription is a precious gift to us, and we truly appreciate it. Thank you so much. And now, let's begin the story. Inside a small animal shelter on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, amidst rows of cold iron cages, Max lay in silence. Once a strong and powerful German shepherd, he was now just a faint shadow of his former self. His once sturdy, muscular body had grown thin, and his deep brown eyes no longer held a glimmer of hope. Around him, other dogs barked and howled whenever someone passed by. Some ran in circles inside their cages, jumping against the bars in desperate attempts to be noticed. But not Max. He just lay there, too exhausted to try, too numb to hope for a miracle. This was a place for the unwanted, a waiting room for the inevitable. Once a dog ended up here, if no one adopted them, there was only one outcome. Scars of the past. No one knew who Max used to be before he arrived. No one knew who his previous owner was, only that he once belonged to a family that turned out to be nothing like what he had believed. The shelter staff had only a few details. Max had been abandoned on a desolate road in the dead of winter, trembling in the snow, starving. When he was found, old wounds covered his body, clear signs of a past filled with beatings and cruelty. Maybe once upon a time, Max had feared humans, but now he didn't fear them anymore. He simply didn't care. He had stopped resisting, stopped hoping, because deep down he knew no amount of trying would ever change anything. Endless days of waiting in vain. It had been 3 weeks since Max arrived at the shelter. Dozens of people had come through, searching for a four-legged friend to take home. The puppies were adopted quickly. The friendly, happy adult dogs, the DTR, ones who wagged their tails excitedly at every visitor, also had a good chance. But Max had nothing to make anyone stop for him. No one wanted a large, scarred dog that didn't wag its tail when they approached. At first, Max used to lift his head whenever someone came by, but after a few times, watching them walk past without stopping, he gave up even that. Day after day, Max simply lay there. No barking, no movement, as if he had accepted his fate. The silent sentence that morning, Sarah, a longtime shelter worker, walked into the kennels with a clipboard in hand. She glanced down, scanning the list, and then stopped at the very last name. She sighed. She had hoped Max would get a chance, but time had run out. Max, scheduled for euthanasia, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Sarah quietly walked up to Max's cage, looking down at the curled-up dog in the corner. She knelt, reaching out to touch the cold metal bars. "I'm sorry, Max." Max didn't react. He didn't understand the words, but somehow he seemed to know. Sarah stood up and walked away in silence. That afternoon, she made one last post on the shelter's social media page, a final desperate hope that someone would see it and adopt Max before it was too late. A simple photo. Max curled up in his cage, his empty eyes staring into the camera. The caption read, "Max, 5 years old. If no one adopts him by tomorrow, he won't have another chance." A faint glimmer of hope. A few miles away, in a small apartment in Seattle, Olivia Carter sat at her desk, a warm cup of tea in her hands, scrolling through social media after a long day at the military hospital. She had always loved animals, but adopting a dog had never crossed her mind. Her job was demanding, her life unpredictable. There were too many reasons to say no. But tonight, something felt different. Max's photo appeared on her screen. That hauntingly sad gaze, as if he had seen everything the world had to offer and lost it all. Her finger hesitated, Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know why, but something about this dog pulled her in. A strange feeling washed over her. She had seen hundreds of similar posts before, but never had she felt this kind of urgency. Max wasn't barking, he wasn't begging, but his eyes wouldn't let her look away. Olivia bit her lip, staring at the photo, then scrolled down to check the comments. No one had claimed Max yet. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. If she didn't do something now, by morning, it might be too late. Without another second of hesitation, she grabbed her phone and dialed the shelter's number. The line rang and rang, but no one answered. She took a deep breath, then left a hurried but determined voicemail. "Good evening. My name is Olivia Carter. I just saw the post about Max. Please don't do anything before I get there in the morning. I want to adopt him." She paused for a moment, then added, "Please, hold on to Max for me." As she set the phone down, a wave of anxiety swelled in her chest. But no matter what happened next, she knew she couldn't turn her back on Max. Somewhere else, unaware of it, Max had just been given his first glimmer of hope after endless days of being forgotten. Olivia Carter was never the impulsive type. As a veterinarian at the Seattle Military Hospital, she was used to analyzing situations, making decisions based on logic and reason. But that night, when she looked into Max's eyes, it felt as if an invisible thread was pulling her toward him. She had left the message, but was it too late? Olivia sat there, gripping her phone tightly, torn between thoughts. Adopting a dog like Max wouldn't be easy. He wasn't a cute, playful puppy. He wasn't the kind of pet that would effortlessly fit into a home. Max was damaged. She could see it in his eyes. She knew she couldn't change Max's past, but she could give him a future. Olivia stepped out onto the balcony, where a cool breeze swept through her dark brown hair. She gazed down at the city streets below, where golden lights flickered in. The night, her mind racing with thoughts. What would adopting Max mean? A completely changed life. No more spontaneous long work trips. A huge responsibility. Max might need months, even years, to learn how to trust humans again. A risk. A dog with a history of abuse might never fully become like other dogs. But then, another thought crept into her mind. If I do nothing, by tomorrow Max will no longer be in this world. This wasn't an impulsive fear. It was reality. The fateful call. Unable to wait any longer, Olivia dialed the shelter's number. "Hello, this is Cloverfield Rescue Center. How can we help you?" A woman's voice answered on the other end. Olivia took a deep breath. "This is Olivia Carter. I just left a message about a dog named Max. I want to adopt him." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then, the woman's voice returned, more cautious this time. "Are you aware of Max's condition? He's not an easy dog." "I know," Olivia cut in, her voice steadier than she expected. "I work with animals in difficult situations every day. I don't expect this to be easy, but I can't let him die without a chance." Another pause. Then, a quiet sigh. "We have Max scheduled for tomorrow morning. If you're serious about adopting him, you need to be here before 8 a.m. I'll be there." Olivia hung up. She glanced at the clock. Almost 1 a.m. She had 6 hours to rest, but sleep no longer mattered. Tomorrow she would change the life of a soul that had almost been forgotten. The next morning, the journey begins. Olivia's car sped down the highway toward the Cloverfield Rescue Center. The dashboard clock blinked 6:47 a.m., less than an hour left before it was too late. Light rain drizzled against the windshield, and the gray sky above signaled a dreary day ahead. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She couldn't bear the thought of arriving too late, of walking in only to find out that Max was gone. The idea sent a surge of panic through her, and she pressed harder on the gas pedal, not caring if she risked a speeding ticket. She had to make it in time. As Olivia pulled into the shelter's parking lot, the clock read 7:29 a.m. She jumped out of the car, nearly sprinting toward the entrance, her breath ragged, her heart pounding. But the sight that met her the moment she stepped inside made her freeze. At the end of the long hallway, two staff members stood by Max's cage. One of them, wearing a white lab coat, held a small syringe in their hand. A lump formed in Olivia's throat. They were about to put him down. Without thinking, she ran toward them, her voice urgent and loud. "Stop! I'm here to adopt him." Both employees jolted in surprise, turning to face her. The older woman, likely the manager, narrowed her eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm Olivia Carter. I called last night. I want to adopt Max." The woman, Martha Henderson, crossed her arms, studying Olivia with a stern gaze. "Are you sure? Max isn't a normal dog." Olivia swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "I know." Martha frowned, glancing at the staff member still holding the syringe. "He has a history of aggression. He's attacked staff before when cornered. Do you really want to take in a dog that may never trust anyone?" Olivia took a deep breath. "I know what Max has been through, but he doesn't deserve to die because of his past." Silence. Martha studied her for a long moment before finally setting the clipboard down on the table. "Have you ever cared for a dog with psychological trauma before?" "I'm a veterinarian at the military hospital. I've worked with service dogs suffering from PTSD. I know what I'm doing." Martha studied Olivia for a long moment before letting out a sigh. "All right. But if anything happens, you take full responsibility. Max doesn't have many chances left. Just give me one." Martha nodded toward the staff member, signaling them to stop the procedure. The syringe was slowly placed back into the kit. Olivia exhaled, relief flooding her chest, but she knew. The real battle had only just begun. The first moment. The cage door creaked open, but Max didn't move. He remained curled in the corner, his lifeless eyes staring into nothingness. He didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't even flinch. There was only resignation. Olivia knelt down, keeping just enough distance. "Hey, Max," she whispered gently. No response. She didn't reach out right away. She wouldn't force him. Dogs who had been broken didn't need pity. They needed time. So she sat there, unmoving, simply letting him feel her presence. In the silence, the only sound was the soft rhythm of his slow, tired breaths. Minutes passed. Then, ever so slowly, Max lifted his eyes to look at her. She didn't react, didn't rush. She just waited. And then, something small, yet deeply significant, happened. Max took in her scent from a distance. He didn't move closer, but he didn't back away either. 1 second, 2 seconds. Then he closed his eyes, as if letting out a deep breath. It wasn't complete trust, but it was acceptance. A small flicker of hope had been lit. Martha stood there watching everything. Finally, she gave a slight nod. "I've never seen him do that with anyone else." Olivia offered a small smile, but deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of a long journey. Carefully, she clipped the leash onto Max's collar. He didn't resist, but he didn't take the first step either. She simply stood there and waited. Then, little by little, Max moved his paws forward, not because he fully trusted her, but maybe, somewhere deep inside, he understood that this wasn't where he belonged. Martha crossed her arms, watching as Olivia led Max out of the kennel area. "Do you really think he can change?" Olivia gave the leash a gentle squeeze, her voice low but certain. "No, I don't think so. But I know he deserves the chance to try." Martha watched them go, her expression softening. The front doors opened, and for the first time in months, Max stepped into the light. Olivia's car slowly came to a stop in front of her small apartment in Seattle. It was almost noon, and soft sunlight filtered through the trees lining the street, but a lingering tension still sat in her chest. She turned to the back seat. Max remained still, not barking, not wagging his tail, not showing any excitement like most dogs would when arriving at a new home. He simply observed in silence, his deep, thoughtful eyes analyzing the situation. "This isn't a cage anymore, Max. This is home." But did Max understand? Did he feel that his life had just entered a new chapter? Olivia took a deep breath and gently opened the car door. "We're home, Max." She unhooked the leash, but Max didn't move. He just looked at her, his eyes as still as the surface of a windless lake. Olivia didn't rush him. She sat down beside the open car door, keeping just enough distance for Max to feel safe. "You don't have to hurry," she whispered. "You can. Step out whenever you're ready. 1 minute, 2 minutes." Finally, Max slowly lifted a paw, cautiously stepping out, every movement deliberate, like he was testing if the ground beneath him was truly safe. Olivia smiled softly. For most dogs, it was just a step. But for Max, it was an act of immense courage. Her apartment wasn't big, but it was warm and neatly kept. The moment Max stepped inside, he didn't run around, didn't sniff curiously, didn't explore. He stood just by the door, his head slightly lowered, his eyes scanning the room, analyzing this unfamiliar space, a place he wasn't sure he could trust yet. Olivia had everything ready. She had placed a soft bed near the window, a bowl of fresh water in the corner, and some dry food neatly set on the kitchen mat. She had hoped for a bit of curiosity, maybe a small sign of interest from Max, but nothing happened. Instead of approaching the bed or sniffing the food, Max slowly backed into a corner and curled up beside the door, just as he had always done in his cage. Old habits. Olivia's heart tightened. She couldn't force him to change overnight. So she sat down, keeping a respectful distance, and pulled out her phone, pretending to be busy. No sudden movements, no forced interactions. In the beginning, the most important thing wasn't engagement. It was presence. That evening, Olivia made a simple meal. She set Max's food bowl in the kitchen, then stepped back, settling onto the couch to watch from a distance, giving him space. Max glanced at the bowl, but didn't approach it right away. He just lay there quietly watching, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Finally, when the room had fallen completely silent, Max slowly stood up. Step by step, he crept toward the food, cautiously sniffing before starting to eat. Not hurriedly, not eagerly. Dogs who were starving usually devoured their food, but Max ate slowly, not because he wasn't hungry, but because he had learned there was never a guarantee of another meal tomorrow. Olivia watched in silence. This wasn't just a meal, it was the first sign that Max was beginning to accept this place. That night, Olivia left her bedroom door open. She wanted Max to have a choice. He could stay by the door, or he could step inside her room. Lying in bed, covers pulled up to her chest, she kept her eyes on the open doorway. No movement, no sound. Eventually, she drifted off to sleep in the quiet. But sometime in the middle of the night, as she unconsciously shifted positions, a faint sound stirred her. A quiet sigh. She opened her eyes. Max was standing at the bedroom doorway, watching her. The dim light from outside cast a soft glow on his silhouette. He didn't step forward. He simply stood there, as if weighing something important in his mind. Olivia didn't say a word. She just closed her eyes again, letting Max know that he wasn't being forced. Minutes passed. Then Max moved, slowly, cautiously, until he curled up on the rug just inside the bedroom. He didn't settle right next to her, but he was closer than before. And to Olivia, that was a monumental step. The days that followed. Small but meaningful steps. The next morning, Olivia woke up early. As she opened her eyes, Max was still there, curled up on the rug. But this time, his eyes weren't filled with tension. She didn't rush to pet him. She simply smiled quietly and walked into the kitchen to make her coffee. Max continued to watch her from a distance, but this time, his ears were slightly perked. A small sign of interest. She knew this was only the beginning. Old wounds didn't heal overnight. But if she could give Max time, if she could be patient, then maybe one day, he would understand that not everyone wanted to hurt him anymore. And most importantly, he had a home now. 3 days had passed since Max arrived, But there weren't any drastic changes. He still kept his distance from Olivia, still spent most of his time curled up in the corner near the door. But there was one small difference she noticed. His ears no longer drooped as low as before. Etijks. First, every time she moved around the house, Max would tense up, his ears pinned back, as if bracing for something bad to happen. But now, occasionally, when she passed by, he would glance at her instead of shrinking away. It was a small change, but, to Olivia, it was the first ray of light breaking through the darkness. The next morning, Olivia decided to try something different. She didn't look directly at Max. She didn't call him over. Instead, she sat on the floor, keeping a comfortable distance, and quietly opened a book. No pressure, no expectations. An hour passed. Then, 2. Olivia remained there, calmly turning the pages, occasionally smiling or taking a deep breath, just enough for Max to know she was there, but not a threat. Max kept his distance, but this time, he didn't look away. He watched, and then, that evening as Olivia sat on the couch watching TV, something unexpected happened. She felt a gentle pressure against her leg. Frozen, she slowly looked down. Max was standing beside her, his nose lightly pressing against her knee. For the first time he had come to her, Olivia didn't move, didn't reach out. She didn't want to break the moment. She simply smiled, letting him decide what came next. Max stood there for a few more seconds before retreating to his usual spot. But this time, he didn't turn his back to her. He lay down, eyes still facing Olivia. She knew. He was starting to accept her. Next, Olivia decided to try taking Max outside. She didn't use the leash right away. She didn't want to make him anxious. Instead, she quietly opened the back door leading to the small garden and stepped aside, letting Max decide whether to go out or not. Max hesitated. He looked at the open door, then back at Olivia. A few seconds passed. Then, he took one step forward, then another. And finally, he stepped outside. For the first time since coming home. Olivia kept her distance, watching from afar. Max sniffed the air, cautiously exploring the garden, as if trying to understand this new space. Then, for a brief moment, his tail moved. Olivia nearly held her breath. It wasn't a full wag. It wasn't excitement. But even the slightest movement was enough for her to know. A part of Max was slowly coming back to life. As Max grew more comfortable being outside, Olivia decided to take another step forward. She sat down on the wooden bench in the garden, one hand resting on her knee, completely still. Max stood at a distance. She didn't call him over. She didn't force him to approach. She simply let him decide. Max looked at her, then glanced around as if weighing his options. Then, after a few minutes, he slowly moved toward her. For the first time, he approached her without fear. Olivia remained, silent, letting him come to her on his own terms. And then, Max gently pressed his nose against her hand, a sign of trust. A wave of emotion swelled inside Olivia, but she stayed calm. Slowly, she lifted her hand and placed it gently on Max's head. Didn't flinch. Instead, he closed his eyes slightly, as if feeling the warmth in her touch. Day by day, Max began to open up more. When Olivia called his name, he responded, acknowledging her presence. He started following her around the house, still keeping some distance, but always keeping her in sight. When Olivia sat on the couch, sometimes Max would come closer, lying at her feet. Nothing happened quickly, but each small change was building toward something bigger. A picture of trust, slowly being rebuilt. One night, as Olivia was working on her laptop, she felt something gently press against her leg. She looked down. Max had rested his head on her lap. Not because he wanted something, not because he needed food. He just wanted to be close to her. Olivia softly ran her hand over his head. This time, with no hesitation, and Max didn't pull away. Instead, he let out a long breath, a deep, relaxed sigh, no longer filled with tension. Olivia knew then. After everything, Max was truly beginning to change. He was no longer the desperate dog curled up in the corner. He had found something he had never truly had before, a real home. Everything seemed to be going well. Max had started trusting Olivia, adapting to his new life. But peace never lasted long. One evening, as Olivia was tidying up the living room, she happened to glance out the window and noticed a black car parked down the street. At first, she thought nothing of it. But an hour passed, then 2. The car was still there. Something felt wrong. Max, who had been lying near the window, suddenly stood up, his ears perked, his body tensed. He didn't bark, but a low, guttural growl rumbled from his throat. Olivia frowned. She had seen Max react to strange noises before, but this was different. This wasn't just a reflex. This was fear. She slowly approached the window, carefully pulling back the curtain. Under the dim glow of the street lamp, she could make out a shadowy figure sitting inside the car, but she couldn't see their face. Then, the car's engine roared as it sped off into the night. A creeping unease settled in Olivia's chest. Someone had found them. The next morning, Olivia decided to dig deeper into Max's past. She called the Cloverfield Rescue Center, hoping to gather more information. "I want to know more about Max. Is there any old record of him?" Martha's voice came through the line. "We don't have much. He was found wandering near an abandoned industrial site." Olivia tightened her grip on the phone. "Has anyone ever inquired about him before?" There was a long silence. Then Martha spoke, her tone hesitant. "Actually, about 3 months ago, a man came here asking about him." Olivia sat up straight, her pulse quickening. "Who?" "He didn't leave a name, but he was very persistent about Max. When we refused to give out any information, he got irritated and left." A cold shiver ran down Olivia's spine. Max wasn't just a stray. Someone was looking for him, and now they had found him. That night, the black car returned. Olivia spotted it from afar, parked across the street with its lights off. A shadowy figure sat inside. But this time, it didn't drive away. Max, who had been lying quietly on the floor, suddenly sprang up, growling fiercely. For the first time, Olivia saw real fear in his eyes. Her heart pounded. "Someone is watching us. What do they want?" She locked every door and called the police. But by the time the patrol car arrived, the mysterious vehicle had disappeared. The officer could only offer reassurance. "It might just be someone lurking around, but if you see it again, call us immediately." Olivia didn't believe it was just a random stranger. She glanced down at Max. He stood right beside her, chest rising and falling rapidly, eyes filled with alertness. He couldn't speak, but Olivia knew. He felt it too. At around 2 a.m., Olivia was deep in sleep when a strange noise jolted her awake. Click. Her eyes flew open, her heart pounding. Footsteps. Outside the porch. Max was already awake. He had moved toward the front door, his entire body tense, muscles coiled. Then, the doorknob slowly turned. Someone was trying to break in. Olivia's pulse thundered in her ears. Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone, quickly dialing 911. But just as she was about to hit call, Max launched at the door, barking ferociously, a storm of rage. His barks weren't just warnings, they were a threat. Outside, hurried footsteps stumbled backward, followed by the sound of someone sprinting down the steps. Olivia rushed to the window just in time to see a shadowy figure jump into the black car before it sped off into the night. She quickly grabbed her phone, her voice tight with urgency. "Someone just tried to break into my house." Max was still barking wildly, his entire body tense with adrenaline. But this time his eyes weren't just filled with anger. He had recognized that person. Max's past was still a mystery, but Olivia now knew one thing for certain. The man outside wasn't just a random stranger. The next morning, the police arrived to investigate, but there weren't many clues left behind. A uniformed officer turned to Olivia. "Do you think someone might be looking for your dog?" Olivia glanced down at Max, then back at the officer. "I'm not sure. But I think his past has something to do with this." The officer nodded. Be careful. If that car comes back, call us immediately. As soon as the police left, Olivia sat down on the floor, reaching out to gently run her fingers through Max's thick fur. You saved me last night, she whispered. Max didn't respond, but he stepped closer, resting his head against her leg. She felt his slow, steady breath, a sign of trust, but Olivia knew. This wasn't over yet. The ghosts of the past hadn't let go, and someone out there was trying to drag Max back to the place he had escaped from. Olivia wouldn't let that happen. She couldn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind caught in a relentless loop of questions. Who was he? Why is he looking for Max? She turned to look at Max, sleeping near the foot of her bed. He was no longer as tense as before, but his body was still slightly rigid, as if his instincts were on high alert. Max had known that man. Olivia was sure of it. The way he growled, the way he reacted the moment he saw the figure. It wasn't just fear. It was recognition. Max's past had never truly disappeared, and now it was coming back in the worst way possible. She had to do something. The next morning, Olivia decided to return to Cloverfield Rescue Center to find more answers. Martha, the shelter's manager, looked concerned when she saw Olivia walk in. Olivia, I'm guessing this is about the dog? Olivia nodded, her voice firm. I need to know everything you have on Max. I think someone is trying to take him back. Martha sighed, then motioned for her to follow her into the office. She opened a file on her computer, scrolling through the records before stopping at one entry. Max was found near an abandoned warehouse in Tacoma about 4 months ago. Olivia frowned. Tacoma? That was nearly 100 miles away. Has anyone else tried to find him before me? Martha nodded, her expression growing more serious. 3 months ago, a man came here. He refused to give his name, but he was very persistent about Max. When we told him the dog had been placed in the adoption system, he got angry and left. A chill ran down Olivia's spine. Max wasn't just a stray. He was connected to something far more dangerous. After leaving the rescue center, Olivia made a decision. She needed to see where Max had been found. She drove toward Tacoma, following the information from the shelter's records. Eventually, she pulled up to an empty lot near a row of abandoned warehouses. The buildings were old, walls stained and crumbling, shattered windows gaping like hollow eyes. It didn't look like a place people lived yet. There were signs of recent activity. In the back seat, Max suddenly tensed. His ears shot up, his gaze locked onto the warehouse, his body rigid. Olivia could feel the unease rolling off him. You've been here before, haven't you? She whispered. Max licked his lips, a nervous gesture. Before Olivia could decide her next move, the warehouse door creaked open. A tall man in a black coat stepped out. He stopped the moment he saw her. Olivia's eyes widened. It was him. The same man who had tried to break into her house. The man narrowed his eyes and started walking toward her, his movements deliberate, unfriendly. Who are you? He asked, his voice low and cold. Olivia didn't back away. She kept her voice steady. I'm the one who adopted Max. The man froze, his eyes locked onto the car behind Olivia, where Max sat, letting out a low, warning growl. He smirked, but there was nothing warm about it. That dog belongs to me. Olivia clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay calm. Max doesn't belong to anyone. I adopted him legally. The man raised an eyebrow. You think the law can protect you from me? This time his voice held no amusement, only a clear, unmistakable threat. Olivia understood immediately. He didn't just want Max back. He wanted to silence anyone who knew too much about this dog's past. Inside the car, Max hadn't taken his eyes off the man. Old memories surfaced. The cold, dark warehouse, the beatings, the shouting. He knew that scent, and in that moment, Max was no longer afraid. His growl deepened, not from anxiety, but from recognition. The man noticed. He took a step back. For the first time, he was the one feeling nervous. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into," he hissed. Olivia calmly stepped toward her car, never breaking eye contact. "Is that so? Then I guess I should have a conversation with the police." The man's hands curled into fists, but he knew Max wouldn't let him get anywhere near her. He clenched his jaw, glaring at her before turning on his heel and disappearing back into the warehouse. Olivia didn't wait. The moment she got back in her car, she dialed the police, reporting the suspicious man and linking him to the break-in at her home. She knew now. This wasn't just about a bad former owner. This man was involved in something bigger, and she wouldn't let him get away. In the back seat, Max sat still, his eyes locked on the warehouse. But this time, there was no fear in them. Olivia reached over, gently running her fingers through his fur. "We won't let him hurt you again, Max. I promise." Max closed his eyes, leaning his head into her hand, as if he believed her. But Olivia knew this wasn't over. This was only the beginning, and this time she would find the truth. And justice would be on their side. The sun had just risen, casting a golden glow over the small backyard behind Olivia's house. The cool morning air carried the scent of fresh grass and the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. Max sat beside her, his deep brown eyes watching the little birds flitting across the wooden fence. The storms had passed. The scars of the past still lingered, but they no longer chained him down. After everything, Olivia had kept her promise. Max was safe, loved, and free. He no longer flinched when a door creaked open, no longer curled up in the corner when someone approached. Now, Max dared to step into the world again, dared to trust. This morning was nothing extraordinary, but to Olivia it meant everything. She set her coffee down and reached out her hand. Max looked at her for a moment, then gently, he rested his head in, her palm exhaling a deep, relaxed sigh, a simple gesture. But Olivia knew what it meant. No more distance, no more fear. Max had finally found his home. A few days later, Olivia received a call from the police. The mysterious man had been arrested after being linked to an illegal dog training operation. Max had once been a part of that past, but now he was free from its shadow. As she hung up the phone, Olivia looked down at Max and reached out, gently stroking his thick fur. "It's over now, Max." He blinked slowly, then rested his head on her lap. The past might leave scars, but no one deserved to live trapped in their pain forever. Max had a new life now, a life where he truly belonged. That evening, Olivia sat on the couch, quietly watching. Max curled up on the soft rug beneath her feet. A gentle smile touched her lips. Max was no longer the hopeless dog behind cold metal bars. He had found his family, and Olivia knew. So had she. Max's story is not just about a rescue dog finding a new life. It's a story of trust, patience, and kindness. Max taught us that no living being deserves to be abandoned, and sometimes all it takes is a second chance. Love has the power to heal, whether it's a wound on the body or a scar on the soul. Even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever. Max didn't just find a home. He found someone who truly loved and protected him. But remember, out there, many dogs like Max are still waiting for someone to save them. If this story touched your heart, don't let it end here. Hit subscribe to Dog Stories and continue following more inspiring tales of brave rescue dogs. Share this story so more people can learn about the dogs that need help. Let's spread love together and give more deserving dogs the chance at a better life. We truly appreciate every bit of support from you. Thank you for listening to Max's story. Let's make the world a better place, one rescue at a time.